As we get near the end of this course, it is important to take time to reflect on the overall picture of what we are doing when we work with children with severe to profound intellectual disability and their families. We have heard the voices of professionals, teachers, and caregivers, and learned many ways in which to work with these children. But perhaps the most important thing that we can do is to recognize that we are dealing with a situation of lifelong care, and this is a very profound experience for caregivers. That is why it is important that we listen to the voices of caregivers and others who may transform our understanding of disability. Let us begin by moving away from viewing disability as a problem and think rather about disability as a resource that helps us to live better and to create a more compassionate and caring world. This is not only important for those who are considered vulnerable, but for all of us who deny and hide our own vulnerability behind an efficient and economically productive exterior. So I'm not talking about charity and pity, where disabled people are there for the sole purpose of making others feel good and blessed through charitable acts. Rather, I would like to suggest that we can learn about ourselves as we recognize the importance of relationships, care, and dependency in the way that they are played out every day in the lives of children with severe to profound intellectual disability. I believe that we need to learn from this, as dependency and vulnerability is a reality within our lives, whether we have a disability or not. We need to recognize that all of us are dependent on care throughout our lifespan to a greater or lesser degree. We need to be looked after as children, when we are old, and when we are sick. Who then are these caregivers? Eva Kitay distinguishes between family caregivers, which is where the majority across the world, and paid caregivers. Both types of caregivers are dependent on others to support their caregiving, as their time and attention is given to caring rather than supporting their own family in economically productive ways. Families struggle with minimal support. Generally, families do not begrudge this care and they take responsibility for it. As one mother told me in previous research, it was not that I did not love my child, it was just that I did not know what to do. Families need support and respect. They are the bedrock for people with intellectual disabilities. While it is evident that there are conflicts sometimes between the needs of the family and the rights of the person with intellectual disability, it would be a mistake to promote the one at the expense of the other. The relationship between the two is critical, and families can be more effective in promoting rights where they feel that their loved one is safe and protected. Paid caregivers are very important, and this work is often carried out by poorly paid women, often women of color. They should be recognized for the critical role that they play in our society. These caregivers need to be paid a living wage. They need to be properly trained and respected for the work that they do. Now, a useful way of understanding good care within relationships for me has been through a philosophy of a feminist ethics of care. Joan Tronto, foremost among these scholars, says, "An ethic of care is an approach to personal, social, moral, and political life that starts from the reality that all human beings need and receive care and give care to others. The care relationships among humans are part of what marks us as human beings. We are always interdependent beings." So Tronto and Fisher define care in this way. They say it is a species activity that includes everything that we do to maintain, continue, and repair our world so that we can live in it as well as possible. That world includes our bodies, ourselves, and our environment, all of which we seek to interweave in a complex life-sustaining web. This definition places care at the center of our lives. We need to give and receive care in order to live a good life, and this happens within relationships. For our purposes, I just want to highlight a few points here. Firstly, an ethics of care focuses on how we give and receive care. It is about relationships. Everyone brings something to the relationship as well as having certain needs. In other words, a child and their carer always have a reciprocal relationship, even if the child is only able to give nonverbal or physical responses. Kite, a university professor, talks about how much she has learned about life and philosophy from her profoundly disabled daughter, Sesha. Taking this one step further, we need to understand that caregivers themselves need care, and the way that we construct our society and provide services should take this into account. How do we care for and support the caregivers? Tronto then identifies the steps that constitute good care, and she identifies 4 steps: attentiveness, responsibility, competence in caring, and then responding to care. Let's start with attentiveness. This means that we need to know and understand the needs of both the child and the caregiver. We need to listen to them and hear what their concerns and needs are and how they would like to be helped or cared for. This sounds very simple, but it is incredibly important and is not always that easy. Let me give you an example. A therapist arrives at a care center and starts to share information about feeding children with cerebral palsy. But did she find out what the caregiver knows beforehand, or why she or he is doing the work in a certain way? How does the child respond to the caregiver in the situation, and are the child's needs being met? Once the therapist has this information, they will be in a better position to take responsibility for the care that is needed. The next stage after attentiveness is taking responsibility. If we know now what the needs are, then who does what? Whose responsibility is it to ensure that caregivers and children have their needs met? In the previous example, the therapist might work with the caregiver to structure meals in such a way that they become a time of learning and relationship building. After this, we need to ensure that the caregivers have the necessary competence to address these needs. Do they know how to offer support and where to get additional support if they do not have the skills? If carers are able to tell us what they need to know, then we need to structure professional development in such a way that they get the necessary skills and knowledge. The last step in the caring process, and this is a very important one, is for those who are receiving the care to respond to the care. This is often very hard for caregivers of children with severe disability because these children might have difficulty in responding due to their intellectual, sensory, and physical impairments. Caregivers work very hard and might not get feedback on the quality of their care, which can be very frustrating at times, and in cases where they do not get support, might even lead to abusive behaviors. So, caregivers need to give feedback and to say what is working for them and what needs to change. This requires caregiver supporters to be attentive to their needs once again and to apply the steps of caring that we have discussed, again in a cyclic way, adapting them according to the teacher response. Practically speaking, for support to caregivers to work, we need to start by listening very carefully to their needs, designating responsible groups of people to meet these needs, building competence in teachers, and then listening to these teachers or caregivers responding to the support offered and being able to adapt accordingly. I think it is evident that this approach is an empowering one that has the potential to support building professional learning communities. In conclusion, I have said that we need to recognize that we are all vulnerable and dependent on others to some degree. When we look at children with severe to profound intellectual disabilities, we see an extreme form of inevitable dependency, and we need to recognize that caring for such children makes the caregiver vulnerable too, as they are not able to look after their own needs without support. If we want good care for children, we need to provide good care for caregivers. And I have suggested that looking at the 4 steps of care might be a good place to start.